Welcome into our bracket eve here. We're less than 24 hours away from the bracket being out. I guess actually less than 18 hours from the bracket being out. But welcome into our special edition Bubble Talk episode. We're going to break down where the bubble stands right now, because there's a lot of teams right now that are on the edge of their seat, as there are every year. But this year in particular, it's a lot more, power conference teams, more national powers, at least historically, that are on the edge of their seat, waiting to hear their name called tomorrow. I think that this is going to be one of the more interesting bracket releases, just because of who's on the bubble that we've had in recent memory.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be interesting. Obviously, we got teams like Carolina, Texas sitting on the bubble, Indiana, obviously, like some storied programs that have large fan bases. So obviously there's going to be outrage kind of regardless of how it goes and if the right teams were put in or not. But that's kind of the fun in it all. So honestly, it's a pretty fun bubble with these teams on it. And just to kind of see the reactions after, I think it's going to be entertaining for me, because, I don't really have a dog in the fight, but it's definitely going to be interesting. And we'll definitely talk about resumes here in a second. So,
and I think the real interesting one, at least as of right now, of course, is Carolina. With a lot of our listeners out there being Carolina fans, they have one of the largest fan bases in the country, right? And that's a team that there's going to be outrage if they don't make it. I don't really know how to feel. I mean, they lost yesterday. I mean, they were getting kind of dominated by Duke without flag. Ended up obviously losing that game. I just don't know. Like we've talked about all year long, like, is their resume really good enough?
No, I mean, I said it before the ACC tournament, and I think before they hosted Duke, that I just didn't really see it. I didn't see the high quality wins. Obviously, they hadn't really lost any games that they are like devastating losses outside of the Stanford game at home. But I just don't think they did enough in non-conference to move the needle. And there's some other teams on the bubble that have more high quality wins than they have. Like, I guess the comparison would be to Indiana. Like, Indiana's sitting at 4 or 5 quad one wins right now, and they had more opportunities, obviously, to stack up those wins in Big Ten play. But I just think the fact that they were able to rack up those wins, and Indiana doesn't have a loss outside of Q1 all season. So I definitely think their resume stacks up. I think it's much better than Carolina's. And if I was to compare those two teams, I think Indiana would be a lock to get in over a team like the Tar Heels. But obviously it was a heartbreaker against Duke last night or 2 nights ago. So with Withers, stepping into the lane, that I don't even need to get into it all that much. We all know how much of a poor play that was. But overall, I still don't see it. They're playing really good ball right now. And yes, they are playing like probably a top 30 team at this point in time, but I don't think that should really matter all that much at this point in the year. Like, it's the whole body of work for me.
Yeah. And, one of the comments I've heard Joe Lenardi make in showing support, I guess, for Carolina is their out of conference strength of schedule, which was the 5th hardest in the country. But they didn't win any of those games. So, he was talking about Texas and North Carolina, comparing their resumes, because this was yesterday. He had Carolina in, Texas out, Texas first team out, and he was comparing, like, Texas played the 280th ranked non-conference schedule versus Carolina 5th, right? But it's hard, to me at least, to reward a team who played a tough non-conference but didn't win any of those games, right? Like they beat UCLA, but that was really it.
Right. Yeah, I mean, yeah, that is their only what? That's their only quad one win. Besides, or did they pick up a second one?
I don't even know. I don't think so.
I think they're like 1-11, 1-12 in quad one. It's just, yeah, you can schedule all those games and like you're going to get way more opportunities than a lot of these like these mid-major teams. Like I wanted the two Big West this entire time. Like we're not going to get that now with Irvine losing in the championship, but I just those teams, they don't get the same opportunity that a team like UNC gets. Like, yeah, you could just say, oh, why don't these mid-major teams just schedule quality competition? Well, it's because nobody wants to play them because they're that good. And you know, if they aren't able to schedule those games, I don't think it's all that fair for these mid-majors to, you know, the knock against them being, oh, they didn't win enough quad one games or play enough quad one games. So when you get these opportunities, you have to win them. So that's just kind of my stance on. I think there should be more mid majors involved in this that played really, really well all year, and like the ones that stacked up a bunch of quad two wins, and because those are the highest quality of competition that they were able to play all season. I think they should be kind of rewarded for that, as opposed to a team like UNC that scheduled all these tough games and had to play in Maui and didn't really gain any traction. Like I think we should kind of take that into account that they didn't win any of those games, obviously, and they should
Right.
it should be counted against them a little bit more.
Right. And like you said too, like it's the whole body of work, right? It's you know, obviously like the way that a team like West Virginia is playing right now, like me as a viewer, I don't really want to see West Virginia in the tournament, right? Because they've been trending in the wrong direction for quite some time. They haven't picked up really a quality win since I think like January 16th against Iowa State. I don't really want to see them in this tournament, right? And so, like, looking at it on the surface, you're like, you know, UNC, since that win by West Virginia, like a team like UNC or a team like Indiana should be in over, you know, a team like West Virginia. But again, going back to that point of body of work, like, unfortunately, like, West Virginia has some wins from the early season that are kind of carrying them. You know, whether again, like I don't personally think that West Virginia should be in the field. I don't think that they belong, but they're probably going to make it because of those wins they picked up early.
Yeah, the only thing with West Virginia is the committee can actually they can knock you for having a major injury. And since DeVries went down, they just haven't really been all that great of a team. Like they do have the win over Kansas on the road to open up conference play without DeVries, and then they beat Iowa State. Besides that, it's been pretty ugly. All those other wins were with DeVries on the floor, like the win against Gonzaga when they beat Arizona, and I believe they picked up one other big win in non-conference. But yeah, they can count that against them, and the way they're playing right now, and they're sitting around what the 10, 11 line
Yeah, right
potentially.
now I believe they're like they're hovering like last four buys, one of the first of the last four in.
If they're kind of viewed as a last four in range team, like I think the committee can take into consideration that DeVries is out and this team isn't a high enough quality team to, you know, make any noise in the tournament. You know, it's kind of like the whole thing with the football, with that committee with the Jordan Travis injury. Obviously, was the whole cause for concern there, and they went undefeated. It's obviously a different situation with that. You know, football is less sample size. I think you can take that stuff into account a little bit more often. In basketball, I don't think you can take it into account as much. But in this instance, like as like a last like tiebreaker sort of thing, I think it's something that you could take into account.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that it's something they should, because like you said, they just haven't been the same team since he went out. Like I just don't think they belong. I watched a bunch of their game against Colorado earlier this week, and like they didn't even look good against Colorado. And Colorado is one of the worst teams in the power conferences.
Yeah, Then for another team, like if you look at Arkansas, like it's kind of the flip side. Like they're going to get Boogie Flan back. Like is that an instance where you could see them moving up a little bit because they were maybe I don't even know if they're a better team with Boogie Flan on the floor, so I don't really know if you can take that into account. But obviously, you have to assume that they're going to get a little bit better with him back. So I don't know. Can you move them up a few spots based off of that news that he's coming back or no? And they're probably going to get in anyway.
Yeah, right. Like right now, I think they're sitting like the top of the last four buys, maybe like even higher than that. So, maybe they move them up a couple spots and put them on like a 9 line, maybe. I think it all depends too on, um, it like one of the games to monitor for tomorrow for the bubble, right? Is that American Championship, UAB in Memphis. Memphis has cut it close 2 straight days. He's kept the bubble teams gnawing on their fingernails for 2 hours because they just refuse to win easily. And so now tomorrow they've got UAB, and if UAB wins, UAB's in, but Memphis is also in, right? So that's going to knock a team on the bubble out. So I think it all depends on how things shake out, whether they move up or not. But I think like Arkansas is in anyway. They're probably a 9 or 10. I guess we'll see how the community values Boogie Flan coming back.
Yeah, and then another bit stealer potentially George Mason if VCU is viewed as an at-large. I don't really see it, but I don't know where they're at. I think they're probably a next 4-out team right now, maybe a first 4-out in some. But
yeah,
if George Mason's able to win that game, I think it makes things interesting, depending on how the committee values a team like VCU that kind of ran through the A10 and has looked like a top 35 team in the entire country. So that will definitely be interesting to see. I do think VCU gets it done. I think they match up pretty well against George Mason. But if George Mason's able to win, I think things could get super interesting. And then we'll see how the committee viewed UC San Diego as well. Like if they throw them on the 10 line, it's going to show that they could have been an at-large anyway. And then, yeah, things are going to get pretty interesting tomorrow because two bid stealers to monitor, or 2 potential bid stealers. So
yeah, no, I'm gonna be watching, very intently as I always am, but even more so this year with every team that gets popped into the little bracket they bring up on CBS. Like this is gonna be exciting. One other team too that I'm struggling to really understand why they've kind of been rewarded this week, despite just beating Georgia, is Oklahoma. They picked up that win against Georgia in the first round, and then made that comeback against Kentucky, but then lost. At the buzzer, and I feel like they've been rewarded. Like they're sitting at the top of the last 4 buys right now, and they were further down than that earlier in the week. I don't really understand the rationale behind why they've moved up.
Yeah, Missouri went at home, Texas went on the road. Like those are big wins as well, like right before. But yeah, that win over Kentucky would have like easily put them in and put them probably on like the 9 line, which is crazy. And it just goes to show that every single win that you have in the SEC is it's a needle moving win. So I think it would have been like for a team like Texas, it would have been huge for them to win another game. Obviously, it would have. I think it would have solidified their spot in the tournament with a win over Tennessee. But obviously, it gets a little more dicey. They're probably looking out right now. But Oklahoma, again, like they did all the work in the non-con. They won a ton of huge games. Beat Michigan. They won the Battle for Atlantis with some massive wins there as well. So the body of work over the entire course of the season, outside of a month and a half little stretch where they struggled to win any games, I think they've done enough with the big wins that they have.
Yeah. So with Texas, do you think it's going to be their lack of scheduling high-level opponents in non-con that comes back to bite them? in non-conference. What they played Ohio State, UConn, NC State, Syracuse. Right.
Yeah, but they also played Chicago State and Mississippi Valley State. So those are huge.
Yeah.
Huge wins there.
Yeah. So, and in those games, they went 2-2 with the 2 wins coming against the 2 worst of those 4. Right. But then obviously in conference, like it's always hard because like you're going to win some of these games, right? Like it's just bound to happen, quick turnaround weeks, teams coming on the road. Like it's not like Texas is a bum team. So, you catch teams at the right time, right? But they did beat A&M twice. They won at Oklahoma. They beat Missouri. Hammered LSU on the road. Not that really matters, but they beat Kentucky, who seems to be very overvalued. And then won at Mississippi State, and then beat Vanderbilt and A&M that second time here in the tournament, in the SEC tournament. Like, there's no shortage of quality SEC wins for them, but it's probably if they end up on the outside looking in, it's going to be those non-conference lack of good wins, I guess.
Yeah, and they kind of seem to do this every year. I mean, I know like when they were in the Big 12, they would always schedule teams that were ranked outside the top 300 in KenPom, and then they did that again. Like Mississippi Valley State is like the worst team in the country by a lot. Chicago State is also pretty bad. Delaware State.
Would they play Arkansas Pine Bluff again?
Pine Bluff
every year.
New Orleans, Northwestern State. Like those teams, like it literally does nothing for you. You could beat those teams by 30, and it doesn't matter. Like those games are 30 to 35 point spreads, so it just doesn't do anything for you except for if the game stays tight. You get a little bit worse in the net. I think that's about all it does for you. So yeah, they just need to schedule a little bit better in non-con next time. Like at least you got to play a couple ranked opponents or power, like just a couple more power schools to mix in there. But yeah, I think overall, I mean, obviously they have some big wins in the SEC, like you said, just like pretty much everyone in this league has at this point. So
right,
I would personally say that they're out just because of the non-con schedule, and they didn't look all that great in non-con either. So yeah, that's kind of just my stance on where they're at.
Yeah. And that leads me, I guess, to kind of the last collection of teams on the bubble that we're going to talk about, and that's the Mountain West. In particular, right, San Diego State, Boise State. Earlier in the week, we talked about that San Diego State, Boise State quarterfinal game in the Mountain West tournament kind of being a play-in game. Whoever won that game probably had the upper hand at getting in. And then Boise State went on to then beat New Mexico after they beat San Diego State, and then lost the championship to Colorado State today. But they've fallen, and San Diego State has maintained in the field, projection-wise anyway. I know they have that win over Houston,
which is huge.
That's kind of carrying them, right?
Yeah, and Creighton. They beat Creighton that same week. So 2 really big wins. I mean, Creighton, I think that was their first game without Pop Isaacs. I don't know if that really matters a ton anymore, but besides that, they didn't really win a ton of huge Mountain West games. I mean, they could have lost way more games in this league than they actually did. They were down to the worst teams in this league by double digits. Like they almost lost to Air Force on the road. They had to win at the buzzer on a layup that was basically handed to them.
We both watched that San Jose State game.
Oh yeah, I wish I didn't.
But they were down like 20 or 16 or
yeah. They looked like a middle school team. Like I'm scarred for life because I had to watch that first half. It was pretty ugly. But I mean, the first 4 minutes they looked, like actually looked like a college basketball team.
16-0 like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's just. I mean, they ultimately won a lot of these games. So I guess I can't hold it against them because I'm not like a huge fan of the narrative. Oh, you got to beat this team by 20 to 25, and you're like gaming the net at that point. Like it's just not. I'm not really a fan of that really at all. But yeah, just how they've looked. Like eye test has not. They've not passed any sort of eye test this season, especially with their offense. But yeah, it's tough. I don't think the Houston win should carry them, but I mean that's one of the best wins in the entire country all season long. So I don't know. I'm not really sure if they're going to get in or not, but yeah, I'm probably 50-50 on the Aztecs. I want them to
Yeah,
get in because I love watching them. Like I love watching their defense. I love Brian Dutcher and his game planning, but I just don't know if I can get there.
yeah, and even with Boise's little run here in the Mountain West tournament, are they out? You think?
They might have a better resume. Honestly, I mean,
I kind of thought so.
it's close. I mean, that Clemson win aged super well, although albeit it was a home game. I mean, it's a quad one win, and I think they have bigger wins in the league. They beat St. Mary's as well. Like
Hmm.
that's also a massive win, and I don't know. I don't think they have any like horrific
And
losses outside
and
of
did you
what
say
did they
did
lose
you
to
already say they
Wyoming?
beat Clemson?
Beat Clemson like early in the year, and then
Yeah,
beat St. Mary's on neutral floor, which I think it
right,
was technically a game, but still, I mean, those are still two massive wins over surefire tournament teams, and yeah, and I don't think they
right,
have those bad losses that San Diego State took in league play. Lost to UNLV twice. Like you just can't really afford those losses. Like UNLV was reeling at the end of the season, and they still lost to them by 7 on the road. So yeah, I think Boise ultimately has a better resume, and I think if I had to pick one, I would pick them.
yeah. I'm much more on the Boise train than San Diego State. And then I guess the last team really sitting on the bubble that is honestly kind of perplexing to me is Xavier. Um, I look at their resume and lost to Michigan, lost to TCU, lost to Cincinnati, lost to UConn, lost to Marquette, lost to St. John's twice, lost to Creighton, lost to Villanova, lost to Marquette. You know, I just look at their schedule and I don't see a ton of like quality wins, right? Uh, I know they beat Creighton. I know they've been hot recently, but that included beating Providence twice, DePaul, Seton Hall, and Butler twice. Um, I wouldn't really call that an elite stretch of teams. They did beat UConn by 4 at the end of January. Um, but outside of that, I mean, their next best win is probably like Wake Forest. Um,
Yeah.
you know, I don't really see a path for this team being in. And right now, like Joe Lenardi has them second to last team in. Like, if you ask me, I think UNC should be in over them. I think Texas should be in over them. I think, I think that maybe you could throw Wake Forest in over them. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's just not a very like I was a big supporter of Xavier kind of all year, but I just don't really love their resume after really looking at it. Like, what have they done other than beat up on the team similar to UNC as of late? Like, what have they done other than beat up on the teams they're supposed to beat?
Not much. I don't really think they've done all that much. I mean, their biggest win recently is over Creighton by 20 at home. Like it's a good win, obviously, but besides that, I just don't think they really did enough. And in non-conference, like they got away with a couple super dicey games against really bad teams. Obviously, that doesn't really matter a ton because they ultimately ended up winning. But when it comes to the net, obviously that's going to hurt you a little bit. But yeah, I think people kind of just got excited that this team went on a nice little run and started winning a bunch of games, and you know wanted to at least consider them. But I think we're going to see tomorrow that the committee's not really going to have them all that close. I think they're going to be sitting. I mean, they might be. I think they'll be in the next 4 out maybe like the 8th team out. I don't really think they were ever all that close. Like that win over Marquette might have got them in striking range, but I don't even think that win would have been enough. They probably would have had to beat St. John's.
Yeah. Right. And it's funny, like a lot of people take Joe Lunardi's bracketology kind of as the end all be all, right? But he's wrong all the time too, right?
I'm pretty sure he's actually one of like the least accurate bracketologists that like do this for a living, basically. Like there's a lot of bracketologists out there and a lot of them that are unknown because they're not on ESPN. And I think at the end of the year, like people like look back to see how accurate everyone was, and he's at least bottom half. Like he's not even really like one of the more well-respected ones. So I would take what he has to say with a little bit of a grain of salt. I don't really know what the best one is out there. I'm not like super into bracketology. I just like seeing a bracket and studying it once it comes out.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's all just more fun talk with like, especially this year with this bubble, like I said before, with all these power teams and all these like well-respected programs in the mix. So it's going to just be fun to watch and see how it unfolds.
Yeah. So before we wrap things up, any bold predictions for the bracket? Any bold predictions for the bubble? Any surprise teams that have been included in pretty much every field that's left out? Any teams that are maybe a little bit further outside the bubble than or that we've seen that ends up in?
Actually, first, my one seeds, I'd say my one seeds are going to be Auburn, Houston, Duke, and Florida. I think it might be Florida regardless if they lose tomorrow. I
I
don't
think
know.
it
I don't know
could
if
be.
that game's a plan for the one. I think Florida's done too much, especially recently sweeping Alabama, beating Auburn on the road. They beat Tennessee once. Obviously, this is going to be the rubber match, but I think they've done enough to be the one seed. And like, I don't think that's a crazy bold take. I think they're sitting on the one line in pretty much everyone's brackets or everyone's projected brackets. But for bold takes, I'll say the committee values UC San Diego as like a 10 seed. I'll say they put them on the 10 line. I say they were going to be fringe uh, at large anyway. And the fact that they won that game and beat Irvine twice pushed them to a 10 seed. And I think that'll be at the expense of West Virginia being out. I think they're going to be the first team out.
Okay. I like it. I hope they miss. I do.
And Vandy barely sneaks in. They're sitting in the 11 line.
Which I think is just diabolical.
Yeah, it is. It really is. I don't really believe it, but
hey, I mean, I don't think a 6 seed should want to see them.
No. They could put Drake on the 10 line too. That wouldn't surprise me with all they did in the Charleston Classic and how good they were. I mean, they had two really tough losses midseason to Illinois, Chicago, and I don't know who the other team was, but they were two bad losses. So, but I think they could put them on the 10 line with what they did in that tournament.
Yeah. So before we end it, let's rapid fire here. UNC, in or out?
I gotta say out. I think they're out.
Texas?
I think they're out too.
The two Mountain West teams, Boise, San Diego State?
Man. I think Boise is in. I think they both get in. I think they value the Mountain West teams over UNC and Texas.
Boy, that will infuriate.
Like last year, they put 6 in. I guess they did value them a little bit lower because they put 2 in the first 4 games when they really weren't supposed to be there. That is tough. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'll say, how about that? I'll say Boise in, San Diego State out.
All right. And then Indiana.
They're in.
And Xavier.
Yeah, they're out. They'll be playing in the Crown Invitational. We'll see them there as a 1 seed.
Out in Vegas.
Oh yeah. So
That
then with
tournament's a weird time too,
Nebraska
right?
will be there too. Don't you? Yeah, don't
And
doubt
that
that.
tournament's like March 31st to April 6th
Yeah,
or something.
they get a nice little break.
These guys are about to be
They're
practicing.
going to be so locked in for that. I guarantee it. They're going to. How many guys are going to sit out of that tournament?
So many.
Like Bryce Williams ain't playing for Nebraska. It's just
But
everyone's
hey,
best players are
Sam
going to sit.
Hoiberg will.
Yeah, he will. He'll play with a lot of passion and energy and a lot of defense and a lot of missed shots and turnovers.
And Raleigh Worcester.
Yeah, I don't even want to talk about that guy. I'll talk about Bear Cave Yuktajel, though. That's a good player.
Yeah. Anyway, a lot to follow here over the next now close to 17 hours before the bracket releases. A couple bid stealers potentially tomorrow. Bubble's going to be really interesting. So enjoy all the rest of the games that are coming tomorrow, and then the bracket drops at 6 and it's go time. So, stay tuned. We're going to be coming out with game by game previews for every game for the first round in particular. And then we'll do our best for the games after that. But, stay tuned. We're going to have a lot of content coming out this week, as obviously it's the biggest week of the year in all of college basketball.
Yeah, definitely super excited. We'll talk through like our brackets too. We'll try to do something for you guys like the night of the bracket or maybe the next day, just talking about each region, who got a favorable path, stuff like that, who's on upset alert, our top mid majors, stuff like that. We'll talk about the mid major crop. I think it's unbelievable. All the 1 seeds are winning, so it's definitely going to be super exciting. Hopefully a lot of first round upsets. I always love to see those 12, 13 seeds win. I think a lot of other people like to see it too, and it just never happens as often as people say it's going to happen. But it's always super exciting. It's my favorite day of the year. And then hopefully there's a lot of drama in that first round as well.
Yeah. 2 best days of the year in college basketball, Thursday, Friday. So a lot to look forward to this week. But enjoy the rest of the conference championships, and we'll talk to you in all this content that we have coming out here over the next several days.